Welcome to tonight's storytelling session, The Black Bull of Norway. Is a story from Norse culture, also told in Celtic cultures as well. And as we get started moving into the story, I always like to invite the ancestors and the story to come into the room and be with us. And I also like to invite the Holy Spirit and ask that Jesus come in and walk with us as we tell the story, and to guide the energies of the room so that the story may speak to each one of us in its own way and bring about whatever it is that we are to get from the story. And then at the end of the story, we like to participate in what is called feeding the story. And what this is sharing what might strike you or touch you, or whatever it is you may feel called to share at the end of the tale, to give that energy that you receive from the story back to the story, and so that we all leave much more empowered and renewed from the experience. And with that, we shall join the story. In long bygone times, there was a queen, and she had 3 daughters. She was a widowed queen, and her kingdom had fallen into great disrepair. So much so, in fact, that her and her 3 daughters struggled greatly even to eat some days. And this went on for a long time. And as we join the story, her daughters were just coming into that time when they should be going out into the world and finding husbands and marriages and lives of their own. And there happened to be an old hen wife who lived in the nearby town who had always taken pity upon the old queen. And the old queen knew that she had the ability to foretell fortunes. In fact, some of the townsfolk, not fairly, thought of her as a witch. But really, she was just the wise old woman who knew the energies and flows of the world. And so it was, she sent her oldest daughter down to the henwife to receive her fortune. And the eldest daughter, grateful for the opportunity to potentially be able to leave the bedraggled kingdom, went very excitedly one morning down to the henwife. And the henwife greeted her very excitedly, bade her come in, and brought her to her back door, instructed her to look out the back door, up the grassy hill, onto the high road up there. For upon the high road would be where she would see her fortune coming for her. And as she stood there, the door shimmered with light, and she watched. And after about an hour of sitting there, lo and behold, her fortune showed up in the form of an ornately decorated carriage pulled by 6 large, beautiful, powerful, cream-colored horses. And the carriage was speeding down the high road. So excited was the princess that she left immediately, barely remembering to bid the henwife farewell and thank her for her services. No, go on, dearie, go, your fortune awaits you, go. And off she ran. And so it was that as she was approaching the castle, her Second oldest sister came running up to her, telling her all about the coach that had already arrived at the castle doors. And so it was that she hurried inside, gathered her things, bade farewell to her mother, and jumped in the coach, and away they went. Now, I have heard tell that she was carried away to a far-off land where she was able to marry a prince. But that is beyond the scope of our tale, but it is rumored that she lived quite happily for most of the rest of her days. Well, so excited was the second oldest daughter at the outcome of this fortune that the very next day she decided to set out to go seek her fortune as well. And as had happened the first time, she too was welcomed by the henwife. She too stood by the door, and the shimmering light appeared. And she gazed up the grassy knoll at the high road, and before lunchtime, there was again an ornate carriage pulled by 6 cream-colored, beautiful, powerful horses. And she scurried out of the cottage and ran to meet her fortune. And it is said that she too was carried away to a prince. Well, the youngest daughter, super excited, very ecstatic, left that very instant with only a few hours left of daylight to go down, so excited to get her fortune, assuming that it would be the same. And she knocked on the henwife's door. She answered, welcomed her in, brought her to the doorway, and there the youngest princess stood and stared and watched and waited. And as the sun set and the light faded, nothing appeared on the high road. She went sadly to the henwife, who informed her, "Aye, dearie, if it did not appear today, then your fortune is not destined to come for you today. You'll have to come back again tomorrow then." And so the princess sadly wandered home, crawled into her bed, and there had a fitful night of sleep. Well, morning came, and upon the morning, she dressed quickly, skipped breakfast, and ran on down to stand before the shimmering doorway. Lunch came, afternoon came, dinner came and went, and still nothing appeared upon the high road. Well, the youngest princess was quite saddened by this as she started to leave to go home. But the old henwife assured her that just because it did not appear today does not mean that her fortune was not still coming for her, and invited her to return upon the morrow. And so it was. She walked home even slower this time, almost slightly saddened, but she held back tears. Resolute, she crawled into bed, slept even more fitfully than the night before, but arose earlier and went out in the dark to arrive before sunrise, lest she missed. And in the very first hour of light, stood there, staring out the doorway. Well, she waited and waited, and just after lunch, when she was starting to despair, there upon the high road appeared a giant, charging, snarling, steam coming from the nostrils, wild horns, scary, intense eyes, a charging black bull. Terrified, she recoiled from the doorway. Trembling, she went to the henwife. "No, no, I cannot go away with the bull. I won't. "Oh, dearie, so sorry. Who would have thought that your fortune would have been the Black Bull of Norway? But go you must, for you have stood at my door, and your fortune has come for you. And should you try to run from it, it will follow you for all of your days. You must go with him." Well, the youngest princess, still in despair, ran home as fast as she could. She beat the black bull to the door, went inside, and begged her mother to not force her to go. But her mother was of the same mind and said as much as the henwife did, that when your fortune calls for you, you must go. And so it was, terrified and trembling, she was lifted up upon the back of the bull, where she clung desperately to his horns as the black bull galloped off into the wild. And with amazing speed, they covered leagues and leagues, the landscape speeding by so fast. But the youngest princess saw none of it, as tears streamed down her eyes, terrified in fear. And as the day passed on, she came to a point where she was so faint with fear and hunger, she was about to slip and lose her grip. And it was then that the black bull turned to her and said, "My lady," in a beautiful musical voice, soft and gentle, "eat out of my right ear and drink out of my left ear, and you shall be renewed." And with trembling fingers, she reached into the right ear, and out should appear bread and cheese. And she reached into the left ear, and out appeared a flagon of wine. And she ate and drank, and found herself refreshingly renewed and filled with strength. And as the black bull traveled on, as the evening came, there upon the horizon appeared a most opulent, large, gigantic castle made of black stone. And the black bull slowed his gait and wandered slowly up to the castle doors, where he was greeted. And he informed the young princess that here dwelled one of his brothers, and that here she would be able to rest and dine for the evening, and they would carry on their journey again in the morning. And so it was, the black bull's brother and wife brought her in. She was able to participate in a most wonderful, elegant meal, the likes of which she had never had before. And then was escorted up to a bedchamber, gilded all over with gold, a princess bed with canopy and golden threads, silk sheets, and the most comfortable mattress she had ever slept upon. So warm and snuggly was it, in fact, that she almost couldn't get out of bed the next morning. It was the kind of mattress that pulled you in and held you there. Well, morning came, and as she was leaving the castle, the brother and the wife came out and presented her with an apple. And they told her to keep the apple and to not break it until she found herself in her most direst need. And then, when she opened it, it would help her. Well, the princess put the apple into her pocket as the black bull returned from grazing on the castle grounds where he had slept that night. And she mounted upon the back of the bull, and away they traveled that day. Well, the princess was feeling much renewed, much rested, and a little less afraid. That today she stood up just a little straighter, held on with a little more confidence, and today she saw the landscape speeding by and watched as they traveled on their journey. And that night they came to another castle, this one larger than the last. And again, the black bull informed her that this was another of his brothers. And again she dined on food finer than the last time, slept in a bedchamber more decadent and comfortable than the last. And in the morning, when she left the castle, the brother and the wife presented her with the largest pear that she had ever seen, and again instructed her not to break it until her most direst need, for it would help her. And again, the black bull and the princess set off, traveling leagues upon leagues upon leagues, and the princess now was feeling confident and strong. Fear had vanished, and she was embracing her fortune. And that night they came to get an even larger castle. And the black bull informed her that this was the castle of his youngest brother. But this one stood upon the seashore, and the air smelled of the sweet, salty air, and the breeze flowing through her hair tingled with energy and promise of a future. And that night she dined elegantly and slept so comfortably, and so snugly was the mattress and the blankets, that this morning she actually needed help being pulled from the bed. And as she was leaving, the youngest brother and his wife presented her with a plum and instructed her once again, do not break this plum until you are in your direst need, and it will help you on your way. And so they traveled again. Leagues upon leagues upon leagues they traveled. But this time, as it came on to evening, no castle appeared, and the grass around the feet of the bull began to dry and crunch and wither and turn black. And they came upon a hill looking down into a valley where grew a twisted, forested glen, and the energy was cold and uninviting. And the black bull slowed its gait, descended down the hill to where a large rock stood before an arched opening into the glen. And there he said, "My lady, you must now sit here upon this rock, for we have traveled here, for I must face and do battle with an evil spirit that has laid a magical curse upon me. And this battle shall be unto the death. I have brought you here to help guard this entrance, and here you must sit, and you mustn't move or speak, lest the evil spirit take notice of you." "How will I know what has happened to you once you go inside?" "You will know what has happened to me by a change in your surroundings. For should I fall to the spirit, the sky shall turn red as blood. But should I triumph, the sky shall turn blue, and I will come for you. You must sit still and not speak until I return." And so she sat upon the rock, legs crossed, not speaking. She did not even tremble for fear that she might bring upon the gaze of this evil spirit, and the black bull disappeared within the grove. For a time, all was quiet, and the princess began to wonder what was happening inside. And then, suddenly, without warning, the sky turned a deep azure blue, and in her excitement and her wonder and delight, for the briefest of moments, she forgot and shifted her legs and crossed her ankles. And in that moment, as the vanquished spirit was leaving the glen, it saw her and cast a spell of invisibility upon her. And as the black bull, now transformed into the prince that he was before, fully freed from his curse, walked from the glen, the spell of invisibility fell upon him as well. And as he exited the glen and looked for her sitting upon the stone, he could not see her. and scour the land he did, walking in circles around and around the glen, and could not see her. And as she sat upon the stone waiting for him to return, no black bull came from the glen. The sky returned to its normal color, and still no bull, and she began to despair and cry herself to sleep that night. And in the morning when she woke, looking around, knowing she could not return and cover the leagues that she had traveled in a lifetime of travel, there was nothing to do but to go on. Where she traveled, she did not pay attention to, and into a vast open wilderness she wandered. And wander she did, for days and days, numb, alone, until at last she saw a large, dark hill appear on the horizon, and was drawn towards it. And when at last she came to the base of the hill, placing a hand to it, she realized this massive hill blocking out horizon to horizon, and the sky above her was made of glass, dark black glass. And try as she might to climb it, she could only gain purchase for a few feet and would slide down. And try as she might, she could gain no purchase upon the hill. Her spirit broken and in despair, she started to wander along the base of it, knowing that if she did not find help soon, she would just give it all up. Well, before the evening falls, she spotted a thin stream of smoke coming from a cottage, and as she approached, she could hear the tink, tink, tink of a blacksmith at work. And as she entered the smithy, she found an old, wizened man working away at creating what looked to be pairs of iron shoes. And she asked the smithy if there was any way, any road over the hill so she could cross. "I know, no, my lass, there is no way over that hill. Some people might think to travel round it, but it goes on for hundreds and hundreds of leagues, and those that have tried all have become lost to that I have known of. You might walk over it, but to do that, you need a pair of iron shoes." "Would you be able to make me a pair of these iron shoes?" I could make them for thee." "How much?" And before she could finish the statement, realized she had no money, even if she was able to purchase them. "No, lass, the shoes are not for that of a purchase to a buyer. They are not for sale. The only way to receive a pair of iron shoes is for those who serve me, for the iron shoes are magic and can only be made through 7 years of service." Now the princess, seeing no way around it, decided that she would serve the blacksmith. And for the next 7 years, she washed his clothes, cleaned his cottage, made his food. And the one task that seemed especially different to her was when she would have to clean the ashes from the smithy and the hearth of the cottage, each day becoming covered in a film of ash, as she brought the ashes out back behind the cottage and was instructed to spread them upon the ground before the glassy hill, and there grew up the vegetables and food for which she made their supper each day. And for 7 long years this went on, until Upon the very hour of the conclusion of the 7 years, the smithy brought to her and presented her with a gleaming pair of iron shoes. And the very next morning, she placed the shoes upon them, kissing the old blacksmith upon the cheek and bidding him farewell, scampered off to climb the hill. And up over the hill, across its top, and back down with ease she walked, as if she was walking on a flat road. It took a day to cross the hill, no sleep, no food. And that evening, a few hours before sunset, she came to an old washerwoman's cottage. And knocking on the door, she thought to ask for a place to sleep for the night. The old woman who answered was an ugly, ugly creature with an evil sneer and not quite right look to the eye. "What do you want?" "I was hoping to find an evening's rest with you. Might I stay with you for tonight?" "Well, you might, but you must do something for me first. The Black Knight of Norway has asked me to wash his mantle white, and I have tried, and scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed, and still upon it drying the stains remain. If you were to try and succeed, then I might grant you a night's rest. But if not, you will be on your way." "The Black Knight? Might he have anything to do with the Black Bull of Norway?" "Aye, they are the same. The Black Bull was a curse cast upon him. He did battle with an evil spirit and broke the curse. But it is said that since that day he has not quite been right in the head, for he goes around mumbling of a fair maiden that once he swore he would have married, but it disappeared and he cannot find. But I say too much, and such a story is of no interest to a stranger such as yourself. Will you attempt to wash the mantle white?" Well, at these words, the heart of the princess lifted high and her spirits soared, and she agreed immediately to attempt to wash his mantle white. And it seemed as though there were magic upon her fingers, for the moment she dipped the mantle into the water, the stains disappeared. Gone. It came from the water, good as new, shining, glinting, already dry. And when she presented it to the old washerwoman, the washerwoman grew quite suspicious and became worried that there was a connection between this lass and the Black Knight of Norway. And since she knew that the Black Knight was coming to the cottage this very night to collect his mantle, she convinced the young princess to go to bed early, for she must be tired and weary from her travels. And the princess gladly agreed. So when the Black Knight of Norway knocked upon the door, she was fast asleep in the old box bed in the corner, and did not hear him come. And when he arrived to collect his mantle, it must be known that upon leaving the glen, when the curse was lifted, this mantle of his had been stained in the battle with the great evil spirit. And as he had wandered the land, searching and looking for the young princess, he had come upon an old wise woman who had told him that one day he should find a maiden that would be able to wash the mantle white, and that she would be the one that he should marry. for she would prove to be his soulmate. And so it was for the last 7 years he had scoured the land, seeking the maiden that could wash his mantle white. So, when the old washerwoman presented the mantle and told the Black Knight of Norway that her daughter had washed it clean, he agreed to marry her the very next day and said he would return. Well, in the morning, when the young princess awoke and learned that the Black Knight of Norway had come and the wedding was planned, she grew into a deep, deep pit of despair, longing and sadness, and knew not what to do. But as she sat there, a distant memory tugged at the back of her mind, and as she placed her hand upon her pockets, there she felt and remembered the apple that she had been given at the first castle that she had came to. Looking down at it and despairing that this day she might lose the love of her life, could not think of any more dire a need than this moment. And so she broke it open, and what should fall into her hands was a pile of the most beautiful gems of all kinds of stones that she had ever seen. And upon seeing them, a thought grew into her mind. And she went to the old washerwoman and presented them to her and asked her that if she would postpone the wedding for one night, and that when the Black Knight of Norway came and stayed in the next door apartment, if she would be allowed to go in to his bedchamber at night and sing to him, that she would give the washerwoman the gems. Well, the old washerwoman was a sly one indeed, and had no fear of this, for she planned to give a sleeping potion to the Black Knight of Norway. So she took the gems, locked them in the chest, and told the princess that she would come for her when all was ready for her. And when the Black Knight of Norway came, she set him up in the apartment, gave to him a draught of nice warm mead with the sleeping potion inside. And so that night he slept most deeply and did not even so much as stir. And when the young princess came into his bedchamber that night and sat upon a chair watching him sleep so peacefully, she began to sing, "7 years I served for thee, the hill of glass I climbed for thee, the mantle white I washed for thee. Will you not waken and turn to me?" All night long, over and over again, she sang this song. But he did not wake. And in the morning, in despair, when the old washerwoman came to collect her, she went back to her room. But then she decided she would pull out the pear and break it, hoping for something else that might help her. And what should appear but a larger pile of more valuable gems than the last. Well, she brought them to the old washerwoman, knowing that the glint of greed in her eye she would not be able to resist, and presenting her with the gems convinced her to postpone the wedding yet one more day so that she could go in and sing to him that night. The old washerwoman, realizing that she would be very, very rich at this rate, had no problem doing this. And again that night gave the Black Knight of Norway his draught of sleeping, so that he would not wake. And in went the princess, again singing, "7 years I served thee, The hill of glass I climbed for thee, the mantle white I washed for thee. Will you not waken and turn to me? And again the morning came, and the old washerwoman came to collect her. And back to her room she went. And there, in desperation, pulled forth the plum, broke it, and went again with an even larger pile of gems than before, and convinced the old washerwoman to postpone just one more night so she could sleep into the chamber with the sleeping prince and sing to him once more. Well, of course the old washerwoman agreed, but the Black Knight of Norway was becoming quite restless at his wedding being constantly postponed each day, that he decided to take his men out into the forest for a hunt. And while they were out hunting, his manservant, who was riding alongside of him, grew some courage to say to him and ask, for he had been wondering these last 2 days, who was this beautiful maiden that was singing to him all night long? What? A maiden singing to me at night? No such rubbish, no such thing has happened. What are you talking about, man? You've had a maiden in your room every night for the last 2 nights singing the most beautiful, sad, sad song. Have you not heard it? No. I have slept soundlessly these last few nights. I have not so much as stirred nor dreamed a dream. Well, the manservant suggested to him that he might not want to take the draught of the old washerwoman this night, so that he might not sleep so soundly, and see if the maiden came yet one more night. Normally, the Black Knight of Norway would not have listened to his manservant and thought him quite crazy, but there was such an insistence in the man's voice that he believed it so much that he couldn't help but be curious. And so that night, as he was preparing for bed, and the old washerwoman brought him his draught, he pretended to taste it, and then said to her that it was too sweet, and she said that she would bring something to make it less sweet. And while she was gone, he poured it out the window, and when she returned, he informed her that he had already drank it, despite the sweetness, and that he was ready to bed, and bid her farewell. And that night, when the young princess slipped into the bedchamber and sat beside the bed, the Black Knight of Norway lay awake, and when he heard her soft, sweet voice singing, "7 years I served for thee, the hill of glass I climbed for thee, the mantle white I washed for thee. Will you not waken and turn to me?" He flew up out of bed, grabbed her in his arms, and kissed her passionately as they were reunited, and he bade her marry her that very next day. And so angry was he at the old washerwoman and the deceitful daughter that he banished them from the kingdom that very hour, never to return. And the young princess and the Black Knight of Norway were married that very afternoon. And it is said that they lived happily for so long a time as was appropriate.